Imagine the Earth as a book, its pages written in stone. 4.5 billion years of turning chapters, each one reshaping the story. Against this endless span, human civilization appears almost invisible. The first farms are only 10,000 years old, the first machines only a few centuries. Our presence is a thin line on the last page of a book that stretches almost without end. What happens to stories written so lightly on the surface of such a restless planet? The Earth does not preserve its records with care. It erases and rewrites. Continents drift across oceans of time. They collide, rising into mountain ranges, only to crumble again into dust. Old crust is dragged deep into the mantle, melted and reborn as something new. Even the strongest stone cannot resist. Wind wears it, grain by grain. Rivers carve valleys and carry the remains to the sea. Rain softens cliffs until they collapse. Frost splits rocks apart each winter. Centuries pass and entire landscapes vanish. A city left behind would not last long. Walls would tumble. Forests would grow where streets once ran. In time, there would be nothing left but soil and silence. Volcanoes erase with sudden violence. They bury the land in ash, and rivers of fire smothering whatever stood before. When the lava cools, it hardens into a blank surface, the past sealed beneath black stone. Glaciers erase with slow force. They scrape across the land like blades of ice, grinding stone into powder, leaving valleys scoured clean. When they melt, no trace of what lay beneath remains. This is the Earth's way. It does not keep still. It does not cling to memory. Even fossils, the rare survivors, exist only because of extraordinary chance. For every creature preserved in stone, countless others have disappeared without leaving a mark. Entire species lived and vanished as if they had never been. And so we must consider, if life itself is so easily lost, how fragile would the memory of a civilization be? If another culture had risen millions of years ago, building, creating, dreaming, what would remain of it now? Perhaps nothing more than a faint signal pressed into stone, a subtle change in soil, a page of the book rewritten, until the words could no longer be read. Do you think humanity is truly the first civilization on Earth? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy explorations like this, don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey. Thank you so much. Now let us turn the page and search for what may be hidden in the silence. In the year 2018, 2 researchers from NASA placed before the world a strange question. It did not come dressed as myth or legend. It was written in the language of science. Yet the heart of it belonged to the oldest curiosity of all. They asked, if there had been another civilization on Earth long before us, would we be able to find it today? They called their thought experiment the Silurian Hypothesis, borrowing the name from a television story where intelligent beings, older than humanity, slumbered beneath the ground. The scientists did not mean to say such creatures were real. They meant something more unsettling. They asked whether the record of the Earth itself might hide the memory of civilizations that came and went long before our own age. For thousands of years, humans have wondered about the past. Legends speak of golden ages, of floods that drowned the world, of kingdoms swallowed by the sea. But these 2 scientists sought no Atlantis. They turned instead to the Earth's deepest pages, to the slow language of stone. What, they asked, would truly remain of us if millions of years were allowed to pass? It is easy to imagine monuments, statues, or cities. Yet the truth is that these would not last. Even the greatest towers would collapse. The tallest walls would crumble. The ruins would be worn down and buried, until no trace remained. But though the buildings might vanish, something else would endure. A civilization, they suggested, leaves not just monuments. It leaves a signal, a change in the chemistry of the world itself. Consider what our own age has already written into the Earth. The air today carries far more carbon than it once did. It is not the slow breath of forests or oceans. It is the sudden mark of industry, sharp and unnatural, like a scar across an old face. In the far future, pressed into layers of stone, that signal will remain. A thin black line, a spike of carbon, declaring that something here once burned and built and altered the sky. There are other marks too. Tiny fragments of plastic have scattered into every corner of the earth. They drift in rivers, sink into the sea, and fall with the snow. They mix with the sand of beaches, they mingle with the soil of forests. One day they will harden into the rock record, forming a layer that nature alone could never create. Future geologists may run their fingers across that strange seam, puzzled by the ghost of our industries. Even the atom bears witness. In the brief years of nuclear testing, humanity scattered isotopes across the globe. Invisible to the eye, yet written deep into the bones of the planet, they will endure long after we are gone. A sudden flash of radiation in the geological record, with no volcano or cosmic event to explain it. To the distant future, it will appear as a moment when the Earth was touched by hands unseen. The scientists called these traces technofossils, not fossils of bone or shell, but of technology itself, ash from our fires, fragments of our concrete, alloys and pigments unknown to the natural world. Each is small, but together they form a chorus, a whisper in stone telling any who come after that intelligence once walked here. And so the Silurian hypothesis turns its gaze backward. If these are the signals we will leave behind, what signals might already lie hidden beneath our feet? The Earth's history is filled with sudden shifts. Times when carbon rose sharply, times when climates changed with unnatural speed, times when extinction swept across the living world. We explain these with asteroids, with volcanoes, with the deep rhythms of the ocean, but the question remains, could one of those sudden marks be the trace of a civilization that came and went before memory began? The idea is not proof. The scientists never claimed it was. They offered only a way to think differently, a reminder that absence is not certainty, that silence is not always empty. For if our own signal can be pressed so quickly into stone, then why not another? If our own age can alter the planet in centuries, then why not an age long ago, erased except for a thin and curious line in the rock? The Silurian hypothesis is a story without an ending. It does not tell us who came before, or whether anyone did. It only widens the horizon, reminding us that we are small, and that time is vast. And in that vastness, perhaps we are not as alone in history as we imagine. Long before history was written, people told stories of water, stories of rising seas, of floods that swept across the land, of cities swallowed whole. These tales appear in cultures spread across the earth, separated by distance, yet carrying the same haunting rhythm. Perhaps they were only myths, or perhaps they were memories, fragments of something the world once lived through together. The oldest known flood story is found in the Epic of Gilgamesh, written on clay tablets more than 4,000 years ago. It tells of Utnapishtim, warned by the gods to build a great boat before waters rose and drowned the world. His vessel carried family, animals, and seeds of every kind. When the flood ended, he released birds to search for land. The tale is so familiar that when read today, it echoes the story of Noah in the Bible, written centuries later. Two different traditions, yet the same image. A flood that erased almost everything, leaving only a few survivors to begin again. In Greece, Plato told the story of Atlantis, a mighty civilization that vanished beneath the sea. He wrote not as a poet but as a philosopher, claiming that Atlantis had been real, a great island empire destroyed in a single day and night of storms and earthquakes. For some, it was allegory. For others, a memory disguised as myth. The idea of a lost civilization swallowed by water has haunted imagination ever since. In India, the city of Dwarka holds a similar place in memory. Ancient texts describe it as the dwelling place of Krishna, a shining city with walls of gold, silver and precious stone, eventually reclaimed by the sea. For centuries it was only legend. Then, in recent decades, divers off the coast of Gujarat found the remains of stone structures on the seabed. Streets, walls and foundations lie beneath the waves, silent but present, as if confirming that the myth had always remembered something real. And beyond myth, there are landscapes the sea has claimed within human memory. Doggerland, once a vast plain that connected Britain to continental Europe, was home to forests, rivers, and people. When the Ice Age ended and the seas rose, it disappeared beneath the North Sea. Today only traces remain, fragments of bone, tools, and peat pulled from the ocean floor by fishermen's nets. A land that was once walked upon now lies hidden, its story preserved only in artifacts and legend. Farther east, off the coast of Japan, lies the mysterious site of Yonaguni. Beneath the water stands a vast stone structure, terraces, steps, and what look like avenues carved into the bedrock. Some say it is the work of natural forces. Others see the outline of a forgotten city, drowned by the rising sea thousands of years ago. Whether shaped by people or by time, Yonaguni feeds the same longing, the sense that beneath the waves lie memories of lives and cultures erased. What all these stories share is more than water. They share the theme of erasure, of civilizations undone in a single sweep. To the people who told them, floods were not just natural disasters, they were thresholds. One age ending, another beginning. Survivors standing on strange shores, carrying with them the memory of what had been lost. Modern scholars see in these myths a possible memory of the end of the Ice Age, when melting glaciers raised sea levels and drowned coastlines. To ancient eyes, it must have felt as though the whole world was being swallowed. Over time, the memory of these floods became myth, yet behind the legend lies the echo of something real. It does not preserve details with precision, but it preserves meaning. It carries the truth that something happened, that the world was broken, that people endured. In the silence of the archaeological record, myth becomes a bridge, a way for memory to survive when stone and wood have long since vanished. The flood stories remind us that history is not only written in stone. Sometimes it is carried in the rhythm of words, passed down through generations, so that even when the land itself is lost, the memory of its people lingers. If you'd like to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe. On a quiet hill in southeastern Turkey lies a site that should not exist. Its name is Göbekli Tepe, the Hill of the Navel. At first glance, it looks like a scatter of broken stones, the kind of ruin one might pass without a second thought. Yet beneath the soil, archaeologists uncovered something that shook the timeline of history. The stones of Göbekli Tepe were not placed there recently. They are 12,000 years old. That is twice as old as Stonehenge, older than the first cities of Mesopotamia, older even than the dawn of farming itself. According to the way history is usually told, people of that age were still hunters and gatherers, living in small groups, moving with the seasons. They were not supposed to build temples. They were not supposed to carve massive pillars or arrange them in circles with skill and intention. And yet here, on this hill, they did. The site is marked by great T-shaped pillars, some rising 16 feet tall, weighing many tons. They were cut from limestone, carried, and set upright in circles. Upon their faces are carved animals, abstract symbols, and figures that seem to speak of myth and ritual. Lions, vultures, scorpions, snakes, foxes, a menagerie of the ancient world, frozen in stone. The images are not random. They are placed with purpose, as if telling a story we no longer know how to read. What is most astonishing is not only the size of the work, but the time in which it was made. According to the old view of history, monumental architecture came only after farming, after people had settled into villages, after surpluses of food allowed for labour beyond survival. Yet Göbekli Tepe stands before all of this. It suggests that belief, ritual, and the desire to build may have come first, and that farming followed in their wake. Some scholars suggest another possibility. Perhaps the knowledge to shape stone and align monuments was not invented here, but inherited. Not directly, but as fragments, whispers of skill passed down from a time before, remembered in story, imitated in practice, until once again people raised great stones into the sky. If so, then Göbekli Tepe is not only a temple, it is a bridge, a place where memory of an earlier age may have surfaced for a brief moment before vanishing again. There is another mystery. After centuries of use, the site was deliberately buried. The stones were covered with earth, sealed as if in a tomb. No one knows why. Was it to protect them, to preserve their power, to mark the end of an age? Whatever the reason, the act of burial ensured that the site would remain hidden, waiting for our time to uncover it. Today, as we stand among its circles, the air feels heavy with questions. How did hunters and gatherers cut and move such stones? Why did they carve these animals, these symbols? Who taught them to build on such a scale, long before history said it was possible? For those who dream of lost civilizations, Göbekli Tepe is a beacon. It does not prove that an earlier civilization once existed, but it opens the door to the possibility. It reminds us that the story of humanity is not as simple or as straight as we once believed. The site stands as a quiet contradiction, a voice from deep time saying, "There is more to the past than you think." And perhaps that is the meaning of Göbekli Tepe, not an answer but a reminder. A reminder that the ground beneath us holds secrets older than memory, that sometimes what we uncover does not fit the story we expect. It lingers in silence, an ancient temple on a lonely hill, its stones still whispering across 12,000 years. For as long as people have told stories, they have imagined the sky filled with chariots and the heavens measured with precision. In the old writings of the world, there are whispers of machines and instruments that seem far too advanced for their time. Were these only myths, or echoes of real knowledge that has since been lost? In the Vedas of India, composed thousands of years ago, we find the word vimana. It is usually translated as chariot or palace, but the descriptions are curious. These craft are said to fly through the sky, to move from place to place with speed, sometimes even to travel between worlds. Some are shaped like spheres, some like towers, some like birds with wings. They are driven by forces described in verses as fire, wind, or even unknown energies. To the faithful, they were the vehicles of gods. To the skeptic, they were metaphors. Yet to the dreamer, they hint at something stranger, the memory of flight in a time when no such thing should have been possible. The Sumerians, in the cradle of Mesopotamia, left behind clay tablets etched with cuneiform. Among their writings are records of the stars. They charted the heavens with detail that seems extraordinary for their age. They named planets invisible to the naked eye, mapped cycles that would take centuries to observe, and described alignments that suggest a knowledge of the larger cosmos. Did they achieve this with careful, patient observation, generation after generation? Or were they inheritors of knowledge from an earlier age, carrying forward what had once been known before memory began? The question lingers in the symbols pressed into clay. And then there is the Antikythera mechanism, pulled from the sea off the coast of Greece, encrusted with centuries of corrosion. It looked at first like nothing more than a broken piece of bronze. But within its gears lay a revelation. The device, more than 2,000 years old, is a complex astronomical calculator. Its wheels and cogs could predict the motions of the sun, the moon, and even eclipses. It is, in essence, a computer, crafted long before the modern age. For years it was thought impossible that such precision technology could exist in the ancient world, yet the mechanism is real, its gears turning with a sophistication that would not be matched for more than a millennium. Scholars argue whether it was unique, the work of a single genius, or whether it represents a fragment of a broader tradition now lost to us. What is clear is that when knowledge is forgotten, it does not always vanish silently. Sometimes it survives as myth, sometimes as legend, sometimes as a lone artifact washed up from the past, baffling those who discover it. Taken together, these threads, the flying Vimana of the Vedas, the star charts of the Sumerians, the bronze gears of the Antikythera mechanism, weave a haunting picture. Perhaps they are inventions of imagination, or perhaps they are reminders that technology, once lost, becomes something else. A flying craft becomes a chariot of the gods. Astronomical data becomes a tale of beings from the sky. A machine corroded by seawater becomes a mystery too advanced for its time. It is tempting to think of progress as a straight line, always moving upward, from simplicity to complexity, from stone to bronze to iron to steel. Yet the past suggests something different. Knowledge may rise and fall. Civilizations may discover, forget, and rediscover. The light of understanding may shine brightly, then be extinguished, leaving behind only shadows in story and fragments in stone. Perhaps that is why these myths and artifacts resonate so deeply. They remind us that our own age, with all its wonders, is not invulnerable. If it were to fall, what would remain? Airplanes might be remembered as winged beasts, satellites as stars that appeared and vanished, computers as strange, silent boxes of unknown purpose. Knowledge becomes myth when the context is gone. The same may have been true before us. Do you believe that ancient civilizations possess technology far beyond current understanding? Please share in the comments. And if you have not subscribed to the channel, don't forget to subscribe to join us on the next journeys. In the end, the past speaks in many voices, some in stone, some in scripture, some in broken gears pulled from the sea. To listen is not to prove, but to wonder. And in that wonder, the line between myth and memory begins to blur. From time to time, the earth gives up an object that does not seem to fit. A fragment of metal buried in ancient stone. A map that shows what should not have been known. A tool discovered in layers older than human history. These are called out-of-place artifacts, or OOPArts, and they linger on the edge between curiosity and controversy. One of the most famous comes from South Africa. In mines that dig into rock 3 billion years old, workers found small metallic spheres. Some are perfectly round, others grooved with parallel lines. They are made of hard material, resistant to scratching, and they look as though they were shaped by design. To some, they are the toys or tools of a forgotten civilization, left behind in stone before humans even walked the earth. To others, they are natural concretions, the result of geological processes that can create surprisingly regular forms. The spheres sit in museums and private collections, silent and unresolved, caught between the language of geology and the imagination of myth. Then there is the Piri Reis map, drawn in the year 1513 by an Ottoman admiral. On its worn surface are coastlines that should not have been known. South America appears with startling accuracy. Even more mysterious, the map seems to show the outline of Antarctica, drawn centuries before its official discovery. Some have claimed it proves the existence of an ancient seafaring culture, one that mapped the world long before the age of exploration. Skeptics point out that the lines may be distortions, errors of projection, or misinterpretations of South American coasts. Yet the map remains an enigma, a document that whispers of knowledge beyond its time. Other artifacts have surfaced in coal seams and stone layers where no such objects should exist. Reports tell of metal tools embedded in rock, nails found deep within stone, or carvings in strata millions of years old. Often the stories spread quickly, captured in books and magazines, only to fade when tested. Some turn out to be hoaxes, crafted to deceive. Others are explained as modern objects that slipped into cracks or were misidentified. Yet a few remain unresolved, their origins uncertain, their presence puzzling. What makes these artifacts so haunting is not only their form but their suggestion. They ask whether the timeline we know is the only one, or whether fragments of other chapters lie hidden in the earth, emerging only by chance. Each object is a small defiance, a whisper that says, perhaps history is larger than the story we tell. Of course, controversy follows them closely. For every claim of ancient mystery, there is a counterclaim of error or fraud. Scientists remind us that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and most OOPArts do not survive rigorous examination. Yet even when debunked, the stories endure. They endure because they touch something deeper than fact. They touch the desire to believe that our world has hidden layers, that the past is stranger than we imagine. The truth may be simple. Perhaps the South African spheres are the work of geology alone, shaped by pressure and time. Perhaps the Piri Reis map is a clever collage of known coastlines, its mysteries born of chance. Perhaps the tools in coal are nothing more than misplaced objects, carried by cracks and water. Yet the persistence of these stories reveals something about us. We are hungry for a narrative in which we are not the first, not the only, not the peak, but part of a longer chain of civilizations rising and falling. And so the OOPArts remain in their half-light, not fully accepted, not fully dismissed. They remind us that even a single object, pulled from the ground or unrolled from an archive, can shift the imagination of history. Perhaps they are errors, or perhaps they are traces, faint but enduring, of a story that has not yet been fully told. Civilizations rise with rivers. They flourish where the soil is rich and the rains are kind. But history reminds us that water, the source of life, can also be the author of decline. When climates shift, when rivers change their course, even the greatest empires may falter. In Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates, the first cities rose from the plains. Irrigation turned dry ground into fertile fields, and harvests supported temples, palaces, and armies. But over centuries, the very system that sustained them carried the seeds of ruin. Water brought salt, seeping into the soil year after year until crops failed and fields turned barren. Droughts came too, when the rivers ran thin. The Sumerians, masters of the first urban world, dwindled not in battle but in hunger, their land exhausted by the silent force of nature. Egypt, nourished by the Nile, seemed eternal. Each year the river flooded, leaving behind black silt that fed the fields, but even the Nile could fail. Around 2200, before Common Era, the floods weakened. The river that had always risen with steady rhythm grew shallow. The land cracked with drought, and famine spread. Records tell of hunger, of order breaking down, of a kingdom sliding into chaos. The Old Kingdom, the age of pyramid builders, ended not with invasion but with the slow collapse of climate. These stories repeat across time. The Maya of Central America faced centuries of shifting rainfall, their great cities abandoned to jungle. The Indus Valley, once home to thriving Harappan cities, withered when rivers changed their paths. Again and again climate speaks, and civilizations must listen or perish. When we read these accounts in the quiet of night, they feel distant, like parables written in sand. Yet their warning is not so far away. Today, our own world stands on the edge of change. Temperatures rise, glaciers retreat, seas advance into the land, storms grow stronger, droughts more severe. The rhythm of nature that seemed steady now trembles. We like to think of ourselves as different from the Sumerians or the pharaohs, as if our machines and cities make us immune. Yet their confidence too must once have felt unshakable. And still the fields turned to dust, the rivers failed, and the people scattered. The question is not whether change will come, but whether we will recognize it in time. History does not repeat in perfect cycles, but it rhymes. The fall of Mesopotamia, the famine of Egypt, the silence of Maya temples, all are reminders that the earth is not only our stage, but our partner, sometimes generous, sometimes stern. When balance is lost, the cost is written in the ruins of empires. And so we must ask, are we walking the same path? Our mark on the earth is greater than any before us. We burn fuels that warm the skies, we cut forests that once cooled the air, we pour into the seas until they rise against our coasts. In the far future, these acts will leave a signal in stone. But before then, they may leave consequences we cannot escape. The ancients left behind stories of their collapse, not always in words, but in silence, in abandoned cities, in layers of soil turned barren. Their lesson is simple, though often forgotten. To live is to listen to the earth. To ignore its changes is to risk becoming only another layer in its long memory. If other civilizations once walked this earth, then where are they now? If intelligence bloomed before humanity, why has no clear trace survived? It is a question that carries us beyond stone and myth, into the silence itself. One possibility is that they were undone by nature. The earth is not a gentle keeper. Floods, earthquakes, eruptions, and impacts strike without warning. A single catastrophe can erase centuries of progress. We know this, because it has happened even in our time. The eruption of Vesuvius buried Pompeii in a single day. The Great Lisbon earthquake leveled a city in minutes. Now imagine a disaster on a larger scale, a comet falling, a supervolcano erupting, oceans swallowing the land. For a civilization millions of years ago, the scars of such an event might remain in geology, but the cities, the people, the voices would be gone. Another answer is darker. Perhaps they destroyed themselves. Intelligence is a gift, but also a burden. The same knowledge that builds can also break. Wars, unchecked industry, or weapons beyond control may have consumed them. In this vision, their disappearance is not the work of chance but of choice, a collapse written by their own hand. We wonder if they left behind warnings, etched into stories or symbols, hoping that whoever came after would avoid their fate. Yet another thought is quieter. What if they did not fall at all but dissolved into nature? A civilization may rise, learn, and then choose not to build higher towers, not to carve deeper scars into the land. They might have blended back into the forests, the rivers, the seas, living in balance until time absorbed their traces. Their story would not end in fire, but in silence, a gentle return to the earth that gave them life. If so, their legacy is invisibility, and that is why we cannot find them. And then there is the possibility that they left, not only from the surface but from the earth itself. We dream of the stars, of leaving this world behind. Could others have done so long before us? If they reached for the sky and slipped into the void, their memory may be written not in the rocks beneath us but in the darkness above. We do not yet know how to look for such signs, but the thought lingers like a shadow at the edge of night. What all these theories share is the reminder that intelligence may not be a single flame, lit only once. It may be like fireflies, flickering here and there across time. A light blooms, shines, and fades. Another rises elsewhere, unaware of the first. Perhaps humanity is one of many such sparks, not the beginning and not the end, but only this moment's glow. If you find these theories interesting, please like the video to let us know you're interested. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss the next secrets of hidden history. The silence of the past offers no clear answer, but within that silence there is space for wonder. Maybe we are alone in history. Or maybe, just maybe, others walked this path before us, their footsteps washed away, their voices carried off by time. What if we are not the first civilization on Earth? After all the questions, the myths, the ruins, and the science, the truth is simple. We do not know. No ruins have been found that prove another great society lived millions of years before us. No machines buried in stone have revealed themselves as certain evidence. Yet in the silence, there are hints. The Silurian Hypothesis reminds us that traces of an industrial age may survive not as monuments but as chemistry. Archaeology shows us places like Göbekli Tepe rising out of time, as if touched by knowledge older than we expected. Mythology carries the memory of floods and lost lands, telling us that people have always remembered a world before their own. None of these are answers. They are invitations. Invitations to imagine a longer story of Earth, one in which intelligence is not a single spark but a flame that may have flickered before. Perhaps humanity is not the beginning. Perhaps we are only the latest chapter in a book that has been written and rewritten for 4.5 billion years. When we look back, we see fragments. A gear pulled from the sea, a map showing too much, a temple built too early, a myth of a city drowned. They do not prove, but together they whisper. They remind us that history is not always complete, that silence can hold more than absence. So we end not with certainty, but with wonder. Perhaps we are alone in time. Perhaps others have come and gone, their voices erased, their memory carried only in stone dust and story. Either way, our place is the same. We are here now, walking upon the earth, aware enough to ask the question. And that too is a miracle. Tonight, when you close your eyes, imagine yourself walking on the traces of lost civilizations, listening to the echoes of the distant past. Let the voices of myth and the whispers of stone drift through your dreams. Sleep well and know that the story continues. Good night, and see you on future journeys.